According to developers, PlayStation 5 is taking a huge step forward in terms of how detailed 3D models can be made compared to current generation PS4 and Xbox One X, and we're looking at 4 times more graphic details compared to current consoles, which makes it possible to create photorealistic graphics. And today we're gonna look into this. Also, in case you are a bit out of the loop, I'm also going to cover the most recent leaks and rumors around PS5 hardware specification as well as pricing. Hey, what is up guys, my name is Robin, welcome to RB Hardware. I'm a Swedish host with bad posture and poor accent. So the details around next generation of gaming consoles are leaking out in a fast pace right now, with information from both Sony and Microsoft now being supplemented by information from developers commentating maybe more than what the two companies might want. Anyway, there is some very interesting information being revealed. It's coming from a developer and it's concerned PlayStation 5 and its ability to handle higher level of details in texture compositions. The information comes from Luca Dalco, I hope I got that name right, who is a studio manager for the developer LKA, who did an interview with IB Times, and in this interview he tells us that PlayStation 5 brings significantly increased performance for so-called texel density. Now, a texel is a fundamental building block that, together with the other building blocks, constitute a texture, and the higher density of these texel elements brings high details when these compositions of textures are displayed in 3D graphics. Basically, it's a bit complicated, guys. Anyway, in this interview with IB Times, Lucas says, "We worked a lot in order to use the highest resolution textures as possible also on PS4. PlayStation 5 will allow us to use an incredible tensile density up to 4096 pixels per square meter. That means the visual will be fully detailed, also in high resolutions. It's one of the most important advantages in visual capacity that we're waiting for." And so let's try and translate this into English. So according to Luca, the powerful hardware inside PS5 allowed the developers to increase the details basically of the textures. And if we do a comparison to current generation of consoles, the texel density of 1024 pixels per square meter is common, and so in other words, we're looking at a huge increase in texture detail, about 4 times more details of a texture, and the higher detail richness makes it possible to give surfaces and 3D models clearer depth, and everything just becomes more realistic and more detailed. And when these models are being displayed on a high resolution screen, the textures can, still retain the depth to make the whole scene feel more real, and this will ultimately create a more photorealistic environment with a lot more depth and even higher resolutions like 4K content and even 8K content. And in comparison, 3D models with lower texel density on PS4 and Xbox One gets a much flatter appearance, which can be seen here, which becomes even more apparent in higher resolutions like 4K and possibly even 8K. Who knows? Now, Luca Dalco also discussed some other specifications of PS5, where ray tracing hardware is highlighted as particularly useful for the kind of game that the studio is currently developing. Now, the studio's upcoming title, Martha is Dead, is a horror game where the game strives for photorealism, and with the increased compute power of PlayStation 5 and the possibility to create more realistic rendering and ray tracing lighting, the studio has a much better opportunity to achieve the graphics vision they want to achieve for this game. The console's SSD storage is also highlighted as an important component, as being able to load textures much faster than what's ever been possible in the past with mechanical spinning hard drives. Now, what do you think about this, guys? Do you actually think Sony is shooting for 8K games here? Probably not, right? But 4K high refresh rate seems to be on both the Sony and Microsoft agenda for sure. Obviously, I want to know your thoughts in the comments. I think this is huge news and I simply cannot wait for next gen. And in case you are a bit out of the loop, here's basically what we know about PlayStation 5 so far. Due to costly hardware parts, PS5 might get more expensive than what Sony anticipated, and this may result in PS5 getting pricier than the PlayStation 4. Sources in the industry report to Bloomberg that the PS5 can cost Sony up to $450 just to manufacture. The leak is coming from Bloomberg, who should be considered a reliable source, but yeah, a disclaimer, we have to treat this with a grain of salt, but if this source is right, Sony could be facing a pretty difficult situation with regards to the retail price of PlayStation 5, because if they want to make profit, which they most likely want to do, they might have to sell the console at a higher price than what they first anticipated, and if that is the case, that might scare potential customers away from choosing the PS5 if the Xbox Series X, for example, turns out to get a more attractive price tag. According to various sources, the PlayStation 4 is said to have cost $381 to manufacture, and it was sold for $399, which means Sony made a whopping $18 in profit for every unit they sold. The Xbox One cost about $471 to build, and it was sold for $499, and we see a pattern here. Turns out both PS4 and the Xbox One cost about $20 more to buy than what they cost to manufacture. Now, hypothetically, if the same pattern is being applied to the PlayStation 5, that means the price tag could end up in the $470 region. So that begs the question, what is it that makes PS5 so much more expensive? Well, it turns out Sony is reported to have trouble finding components such as DRAM memory and NAND flash memory at reasonable prices. It turns out the mobile market steals a lot of these products, which then leads to lower volume and higher prices as a result. And if that wasn't enough, PlayStation 5 is on top of that said to get a relatively expensive cooling solution, and Bloomberg is also reporting about this. In my Xbox Series X versus PS5 dev kit hardware specification video, I talked about PS5 being slightly faster than Xbox Series X despite only being equipped with 36 graphics compute units, which clearly doesn't make any sense, because less compute units would suggest Sony's console would be significantly slower. Well, according to recent inside information, it turns out things are a little bit more complicated than that, and this explains why Sony is investing in such an expensive cooling solution. Sony is unfortunately locked down to specifically 36 graphics compute units. Apparently, in order for Sony to make the hardware scale with older games, making PS5 backward compatible and work with older PS4 games, they are apparently forced of sticking to 36 compute units. Unfortunately, I don't have the reason to why this is, but they cannot put more graphics power inside the PS5, or they won't get all the PS4 games work through backward compatibility basically. Now, while this isn't official, we believe Xbox Series X is having 56 compute units and Sony now are stuck on 36. If this is true, this would leave the PS5 well below 10 teraflops, and if we take a look at Digital Foundry's leak, and this is numbers coming from AMD, we're looking at 9.2 teraflops for the PS5. Now, this is clearly putting Sony in a tough position, as upcoming Xbox Series X with 12 teraflops will significantly outperform the PS5 at its current state. Now, to solve this, Sony's got two options. Sony either has to ditch backward compatibility or invest in a much more competent cooling solution and overclock the GPU unit quite significantly to ultimately shrink the performance gap between the two consoles. Now, opting for a better and a faster graphics unit is definitely out of the question. Sony is not abandoning backward compatibility. There is simply too many gamers that have invested in the PS4 ecosystem that would get furious if Sony went this route, and Sony is simply not gonna let that happen. And so the only option they are left with is to invest in this advanced cooling solution basically.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
This, however, will make the PS5 more expensive, hence why Sony might not even break even with PS5, as this cooling system, despite only costing a few dollars to manufacture, apparently still could cost Sony up to $450 for the complete PS5 unit. So what do you say, guys? What do you think Sony will charge for the PlayStation 5? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, in case you are a bit out of the loop, here's a fast recap of the latest in regards to hardware specifications of the upcoming consoles. Now, these speculations about what the next generation of consoles will offer in terms of hardware and power has been going on for a long time. Digital Foundry has, however, come across some inside information about the specifications of PS5 and Xbox Series X could be getting in terms of GPU, memory, and CPU. Of course, guys, as always with these types of leaks, we cannot really trust them blindly, but Digital Foundry seems to be pretty confident that the data is actually coming from AMD and that they haven't been manipulated. So what does the leak say? Well, PlayStation 5 will have a GPU with 36 Navi compute units that will deliver 9.2 teraflops, and this can be compared to the PlayStation 4 Pro and its 36 GCN compute units that deliver a total of 4.2 teraflops, or the regular PlayStation 4 who's got 1.84 teraflops. Now something to have in mind here is that Navi teraflops deliver better performance than the GCN teraflops, which makes the whole comparison a bit more difficult. Now to put this in perspective, the RX 5700 XT got a total of 40 compute units. Now the GPU should also be able to switch between 3 different modes to allow hardware backward compatibility with PS4 and PS4 Pro. In addition, the PS5 graphics will also get fast GDDR6 memory running at between 448 to 512 GB per second, as well as an 8-core Zen 2 processor, but so far we don't have the clock speed for this one. Rumors suggest a clock frequency of around 3 GHz. In other words, Sony seems to be investing in a machine that balances performance with price to deliver a decent step compared to current consoles while keeping the price down. But what about the Xbox Series X then? Well, based on the information from Digital Foundry, they estimate that the Xbox Series X GPU will have 56 Navi compute units that probably deliver a data processing capacity of around 12 teraflops. And same as before, we get GDDR6 memory at around 560 GB per second, as well as an 8-core processor based on Zen 2, which makes us believe that Microsoft is investing in a real beast of a console that will be higher priced than the PlayStation 5. But yeah guys, I would love to hear your thoughts here. What do you think? Do you think PlayStation 5 will get equally expensive as the Xbox One X, or do you think the Xbox One X will be the more expensive of the two? Now watch either of these two videos and I will see you guys over there. I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.